Okay, I want to talk a little bit about adding some value to your drawing, but we're going to do it as a night scene and we're going to use a layer mask. So I'm going to File Open in Photoshop and I'm going to open two files, Portrait and Cloud. And let's talk a little bit about what the layer mask does first, because it's a really handy tool. When I'm bringing two files in together, I tend to just drag one out of the dock, and then I just drag it into the file that I want to place it in. And in this case, I've got to pull this down below it. I've got to unlock this layer and then pull it down. And you can still see the outline. So I'm going to make this a little bigger to make sure it's covering, and I'll double check it. And it looks fine size-wise. Okay, so I'm going to come down here, and this is your layer mask right there, and it just put that mask on there. You can see it. Now I've got my brush. You're not erasing here. That's a big mistake here, is people think you're erasing using this tool. I'm dropping my opacity in my brush, and I'm going to switch it to a softer, bigger brush. I'm going to go over here. If you hit these two little swatches, that will zero it out to pure black and pure white, which you need for this. I'm dropping that even lower. And now you can see if I have black pulled up, it's painting out my mask, which means it's revealing the clouds underneath. I'm pulling up my opacity a little bit. So it's just revealing the clouds underneath, whatever you put underneath it. But the beauty of it is that if I switch this now to my white swatch, which you can do by just hitting X, by the way, but I can flip it right here too, it'll let me paint that back in. So I can endlessly adjust this, and that's kind of what we're going to use here for this value thing. Okay, so let's open this one up. I'm using Elon Haas drawing for this project because it was a good candidate. And I just dragged it on the icon this time. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put a gray layer on top of our drawing layer. So I'm picking a gray. It doesn't even matter what the gray is because I can adjust it with my levels. I'm going to get rid of this one and make a new layer. And then I'm going to fill it. So now I filled it with gray. You can go to fill if you need to do that. I use the hotkeys. And then I'm going to put this on multiply, which means we're going to be able to see through it. And the value of this isn't too bad. But if I wanted to adjust the value, I could go up to my levels and just pull it lighter or darker. So that makes it a little easier. I do the same thing with color. I throw the color down and then I just adjust it. And again, I'm going to go here and click these two little swatches and zero it out. I want black because I want to start painting things out. I generally tend to start these with a soft brush because I'm just going to start. I'm actually just looking to sort of establish things. And when it's a city like this, then I know a lot of my light's going to come from windows and things like that. Headlights, all that kind of stuff. So I've got this on black, and now I'm going to come in here. That's way too much, so I'm going to knock down my opacity. And now I'm just going to start giving the stuff in the background, the horizon, all that kind of stuff, a little bit of light. I'm going to put a few clouds in here. And maybe we'll add a moon to it later. So it's still a little, that's too much. I got it down on 1. There we go. That's a little better. Then I'll start back here, and then I'll start jumping up to the horizon above the rooftops. Now I'm going to come in here in a second, grab a smudge brush and just start softening some of this. And I'll use that kind of idea to start kind of indicating a little bit of clouds. And also just some of that light you get towards the horizon. Even at night you get it from lights and things like that on the ground. And I'm going to do a pretty quick pass over this because you'll get the point pretty quickly. I also like to start with really definite, obvious places, like windows are going to be lit up at night. And this little place has umbrellas in front of it, so I'm kind of going, okay, well, that could be a restaurant. So that means I can kind of light it up a little more than the rest of the stuff, and kind of go a little crazier with it. And then some of the other things, some of the lights will be on, some will be off, some will be dimmer. And I'll go in here at some point and I'll start doing what I'm doing here. We'll just establish the light. But then I'll come in and I'll just put some really bright spots here and there, because you might have a lamp near the window. I mean, there's a lot of things that affect what you're seeing in the light. They're not always diffused in the same value all throughout and the same brightness all throughout. This truck has the open ordering counter. That would probably be pretty bright in there. You can see I danced a little bit of the lighter value inside the light value inside the ordering window. And then I can get a little of that casting out here onto the sidewalk. And a lot of times I just throw it down real linear like that, and then I just sort of soften it up, and then I reshape it. I go back in with a brush and reshape the edges. I want to get in here and get a little more of the statement of some clouds up there, because I think if I put a moon in there later, that'll make sense. The moon sort of lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to hit some hotter spots in here in this dining area. They could have lamps out there. They could have bulb lights. They could have just all sorts of things. So I'll just sort of indicate a lot of little things. Just dance a lot of little light around in it. And again, with these foreground lights, you can see if you just sort of hit a little hotter spot here and there in windows, it just gives them a little more activity. I want to give this foreground tree a fill here in a minute. And then I'm going to put that on its own layer. At some point, I'll depart from my layer mask layer, and I'll maybe put one or two, maybe three layers above it. But I'm going to darken up this foreground tree here in a sec. And I'll have that on its own layer because if I look at it and I go, well, it's too dark or too light, I can push it a little bit. So the first value I'm throwing down really doesn't matter. And I'd come in and just mix up the values a little bit. Now, it really depends. If this was like an early sort of design discussion or something, I'd probably just leave it about where it is there. Because it's a very clear drawing. It's very easy to light this and to play around with it. And the drawing's saying so much. And again, if it was an early on thing, I don't know if I'd spend forever on it. I'd probably wait till I get further down the line. Now I'm going to light this a little bit differently. I'm using the lasso tool, and I'm just going to basically stay right on the line. When you have a lot of fat line like this, it's pretty nice because you could just sort of use it to hide behind a little bit. And what I'm going to do here is just get this shape of this sign, and then I'm going to pull a gradient over it. Like a little bit like it's bottom lit or something like that. Or even interior lit. Now I pick my gradient tool, and I've got a lighter value, and I've got it on color to transparent. So you can see it goes brighter, and then it kind of drops off a little bit in opacity. And then I'm just going to go through my overlays and see if I can find something that's starting to work. There's a couple here that are starting to work. And then I'll probably pull it back a little bit depending on if it's a little too bright or anything like that, then I'll just drop the opacity down a little bit. And now I'm just starting to play a little bit. I'm kind of thinking like, could the sign be lit in from the interior? And if so, it'd have a hot spot sort of wherever the light bulbs were on the inside. And I'm just kind of playing around with it a little bit. And I've got this on its own layer. So when I start playing around like this, I'll start jumping off. I'll have a layer for my darks. And actually, this is, if you've worked with Canson paper, it's similar. You're adding lights and then darks, and you've sort of started with a mid-tone, and then we're just sort of erasing back. So it's a little bit like a rub-out technique and a little bit like a Canson technique. And at some point, I'd have to darken this street up. I could actually probably darken it up quite a bit. I'm not going to here, but I could go pretty dark with it. And I'll have to do some cast shadows under the vehicles and things like that. And we work over something, then and overspray or something like that, then I'll come back and just sort of erase it out. I'm being really loose with this, and I prefer to do that. And also, things I'll start looking at later are how can I light up one side of the building? This is all artificial light. How can I light up one side of the building? Like in the case where the restaurant is, I could light up that side because it would be catching a lot of that light on the building. That gives me an excuse to darken the other side that's out of the light. And now I've got this on I'm going to put this on a multiply layer. This layer is on its own, so I'm starting to pop in some darks on the roofs just to sort of break things up. The roof, everything's not going to be the same value, obviously. And then I'll put this on multiply at some point. It'll go a little darker, but it'll let me see the line under it a little better. And I'm just going to pop a moon in here. Now again, this is on its own layer. I just popped a value in there. Now I'm just going to adjust the value. I'm just going to lighten it up. That's not too bad. And then if I click the little thumbnail, if I command click the little thumbnail, it'll reselect that selection because I don't want to go outside of this. And I'm just going to give it a couple of hits of value with my brush, and then I'm just going to basically just smudge them out a little bit. All this stuff is basically the same way I would handle it if I was painting it in traditional media. And you'll see it doesn't take a whole lot to get this to sort of read as a moon image. I'm going to add some more light activity into this little restaurant thing. So maybe some little bulb lights, all that kind of stuff. I could really, really go crazy with that. I could have a lot of really bright light spilling out of the interior onto all the tabletops and all that kind of thing. And if I kept going, I probably would. And it would kind of make that the focus of it, which I think would be good. Now just a few architectural lights, sign lights, that kind of thing. But you can see it adds a lot of little sparkle to it. And what I would start doing here now is finding, again, planes, buildings, planes on different things that I can darken up based on what I'm looking at in that light. There's a lot of light activity behind this vehicle, so I could darken it up on this side a little bit. And in a night environment, really watch your light spill. Like this sign up here would spill a lot of light onto the roof. This window where they take orders would spill a lot of light onto this little shelf, and so on and so forth. You got to really manage that because it can get out of control where it starts to be hard to read. Because you don't have a primary light source here. You have multiple light sources. It's not like sunlight or something like that. I want to get a couple of cast shadows under the cars. You really have to do that to ground them. So you always got to kind of figure out where you can put that. Otherwise, they can kind of feel like they're floating. The gumbo truck needs to not have that little gap between the vehicle and the shadow because that's also making it look like it floats a little bit. So I would go in there and clean that up. Okay, I think that's enough. I would keep dancing around this and lighting things and cast shadows and all that until I felt like it was complete enough. But I think that's enough to get the point across.